Frazier swallowed back his anger and apologized.
Whatever,
Dorothy snapped. Despite her attitude, deep down she was relieved that Melly hadn't come. She wouldn't have been able to bear her snooty attitude for the entire visit. At that moment, Natalia came home from work. She found her mother and husband in the living room with frustrated expressions, and she looked at them in confusion.
What's going on? Where's Aunt Melly?
She asked.
Ask your husband,
Dorothy replied, crossing her arms.
Frazier, what's going on?
Natalia asked.
What did you do?
Dorothy cut him off.
He was off who knows where and was 2 hours late. They didn't even make it to the house before deciding to go back home. What will everyone else in the family think of us?
Natalia looked at him in disbelieving anger as her mother continued ranting.
Then, when he finally came home, he had the audacity to ask where they were, as if he didn't know. He really thought he could weasel his way out of taking responsibility.
I can't believe I thought he was being considerate yesterday when he offered to pick them up.
He ended up ditching them as soon as it inconvenienced him, Natalia thought angrily. I can't believe I trusted you. I should have known better, she yelled.
After weighing the pros and cons, he decided to remain silent.
You don't have anything you want to say to me?
She asked, tears welling up in her eyes. I'm sorry, he said quietly before sitting down on the couch. She knew her aunt was unpleasant. They had likely done something that caused him to ditch them at the bus station. Regardless of what they had done, she was angry at his dishonesty.
He could at least just say he doesn't like Aunt Melly so we could put this matter to rest, she thought. He's become more disappointing by the day. Why don't you just divorce him?
Dorothy asked Natalia, as if Frazier wasn't sitting in the same room.
You could set up a date with that friend who's coming back from abroad, she mused out loud. Mom, let's talk about this later. I'm too tired. I'm going to bed, Natalia said.
She stormed out of the room, slamming her bedroom door behind her.
Even a dog is more useful than you,
Dorothy muttered to Frazier before leaving the living room. Over the next few days, Frazier received the cold shoulder at home. It was exhausting to receive such a hateful attitude constantly. Brett asked what was happening when he showed up to work with bags under his eyes. Trusting his friend, Frazier told him the story from beginning to end. To Frazier's annoyance, Brett boomed with laughter. When Brett noticed how angry Frazier was becoming, he took a deep breath and shook his head to calm down.
Sorry. It's just that your situation seems borderline unbelievable. Let's just get down to business.
Frazier was still frowning but seemed receptive to changing the subject.
After everything we did the other day, I'm trying to figure out why Hugh hasn't made any moves, Brett said.
Things won't be quiet for long. Just be patient, Frazier replied. There was no way Hugh would take such a huge loss in cash and talent without retaliating. Hugh was likely getting his ducks in a row to ensure his next step made an impact. Frazier didn't doubt that Hugh was keeping a close eye on their every move during this time. Ryan knocked on the door before stepping into the office.
I just got word from Prescott. He said Hugh set up an underground fighting ring. Besides the cash prize, the winner also gets a chance to have a meal with him.
Brett sat up straight.
Are you sure this news comes from a reliable source? You know how Prescott is.
Prescott was the kind of man who worked for the highest bidder. He only worked for them because they provided the most benefits and safety. If someone else could afford more, he would sell them out in a heartbeat.
Prescott said that it cost him a pretty penny to get this information. It should be true, but we really have no way of knowing whether it's a trap, Ryan replied.
Frazier doubted the winner would actually get to meet Hugh. Being considered even an acquaintance with him would earn the winner considerable street cred. Would he really consider showing his real face? He wondered. Prescott said this is an excellent opportunity. But it's your decision, Ryan said. There's nothing to think about. This is clearly a trap set up by Hugh. You can't go, Brett protested. They both stared at him, awaiting his decision. I'm going to go, Frazier said, after a long pause. He already had a plan for how he would deal with Hugh. Although Ryan had been encouraging Frazier to go, his shocked expression matched Brett's. It seemed like a dangerous decision. Are you sure? Hugh's people will be all over the area. We'll basically be throwing away our lives, Brett said. Ryan agreed with Brett, but knew it wasn't his place to say anything. Have you two forgotten about the feud between Malcolm and Hugh? Frazier asked. You can't be serious, Brett said. I won't go in the ring this time. Slip some information to Malcolm. He won't pass up an opportunity like this, Frazier said. Malcolm was certainly strong enough to become the champion. The loss of his arm had motivated him to train in ways that made his moves difficult to predict for opponents. He never let his defenses down, and was often at least one step ahead. But Hugh cut off Malcolm's arm. Isn't it too ostentatious if he shows up? Hugh will go back on his word, Brett said. No, he won't, Frazier said. The blank expression in front of him proved he needed to explain his reasoning. They already know each other, so he doesn't need to break his promise. Besides, Hugh has an ego. He's defeated Malcolm before, so he won't take him seriously. Malcolm was one of the few people who could actually recognize Hugh. Now that Brett and Ryan understood, they looked impressed. We can't move forward until Hugh is taken down, Frazier said. The trio began hashing out the details of their plan, determined to ensure things would go as smoothly as possible. When Frazier left work for the day, he began walking down the street to a nearby shopping center. On the way, he spotted a man and a woman arguing in the plaza, causing other shoppers to stop and watch. He realized it was Sheila and her boyfriend, Billy. Let go of me, Sheila shrieked. She tried again to unsuccessfully yank her arm out of Billy's grasp. Why are you so angry? I told you she's just a friend. If anything, Mindy is like a sister to me. There's nothing going on between us, he yelled back. A few passers-by lingered to watch, unsure whether they should intervene. One woman rolled her eyes at Billy's excuse. Sheila's face felt hot and turned red from embarrassment and annoyance. She wished the earth would open up and swallow her whole. The previous day, they had made plans to go shopping together the next afternoon. However, Billy said he couldn't make it at the last minute because something important had come up. Although disappointed, she understood and decided to go shopping alone. She hadn't expected to find her boyfriend cozying up to another woman in a lingerie store. When she had stormed in to confront him, he had encouraged the other woman, Mindy, to leave and stay out of the drama. Just like a true gentleman, Sheila thought bitterly as she glared at the pair. If only he could be so considerate to me. Sister? What kind of person wears matching outfits and buys underwear with their sister? Do you think I'm stupid? She snapped. Stop causing a scene. Let's talk about this at home, he replied. She swung her arm as she tried to twist out of his grip again. In the process, her bag smacked him across the face. Enraged, he raised his hand to slap her back. However, he wasn't able to make contact as Frazier stepped forward and grabbed his wrist. Billy recognized Frazier with surprise. He and Sheila had dinner with Frazier and Natalia on several occasions. He knew the kinds of things most people said about Frazier. What does a piece of trash like you want? Billy snapped as he tried to pull out of the other man's grip. Frazier snorted. If you're hitting a woman, then you might be a bigger piece of trash than I am. He yanked on Billy's arm, forcing him to take several steps back and release Sheila. Sheila was staring at Frazier with surprise. She had a generally low opinion of him, thinking he mooched off his wife, but she had never seen him confront anyone.
Why is he standing up for me? She wondered.
Billy was steaming with anger at being called out by Frazier.
Take a good look, everybody. It's the loser, also known as Natalia Laplace's husband,
Billy yelled out at the crowd. He hoped embarrassing Frazier would get him to let go. Several people started filming on their phones. Everyone looked between the trio in confusion, and those just joining the crowd didn't know whom to blame for the conflict. Billy faced Frazier again, satisfied that he had had enough of the people's attention. Unfortunately for Billy, Frazier received constant disrespect at home. The opinions of a random wife-beater or a crowd of strangers didn't concern him.
Aren't you going to apologize?
Billy asked with a smug expression. Sheila stepped forward.
You're the one who should be apologizing. What really happened between you and Mindy?
Billy laughed.
You're always making stuff up and jumping to conclusions, he said.
She stared at him in shock. She felt like she was going crazy.
How can he deny it when I saw them together with my own 2 eyes? She thought.
Maybe you're just lying about me because you feel guilty, he said. I saw you come out of a hotel with him the other day. It's clear you're messing around with your best friend's husband behind her back.
Stop trying to turn this around, she yelled.
Several people in the crowd looked at her with disapproval. Billy fed off their attention.
Look at their audacity. They're in public together, he shouted. But don't feel too bad for Natalia. She already slept with Brett Andrews to become CEO.
He puffed his chest out proudly as the crowd grew. He felt like he had successfully removed the blame from himself. Sheila looked around in horror. She was innocent, but her cheating boyfriend made her look like the wrong woman in front of the public.
Are you done talking?
Frazier asked, twisting Billy's hand to bend his wrist backward. He had originally only planned on intervening long enough to ensure Sheila wasn't hurt, but he couldn't let Billy get away with slandering his wife. Billy winced from the pain, but still refused to let go of his bravado.
It's not like he can really do anything to me in front of all these people, he thought. Who do you think you are to talk to me like that? Billy said.
The person whose wife you just insulted, Frazier said, grabbing a fistful of Billy's hair. Billy looked at him with a shocked expression.
Apologize,
Frazier snapped, yanking his head back.
For what?
Billy yelped. As much as he wanted to fight back, the amount of pressure Frazier was applying to his wrist made it feel like it was about to break.
You're going to break my arm, he complained.
Frazier ignored him.
Apologize,
he insisted.
I'm sorry, Billy cried out.
For? Frazier prompted him.
For causing a scene, for lying about you and Sheila, for cheating on Sheila,
Billy said loud enough for the onlookers to hear. Frazier sneered at him.
And?
Billy looked at him with confusion before realizing he wanted him to apologize for what he said about Natalia. Frazier didn't care about his own reputation, just Natalia's.
For what I said about your wife, Natalia, Billy continued.
He turned to face the nearest person recording on their phone.
Natalia, I'm sorry for what I said about you, he repeated.
Finally, Frazier let go of Billy. Billy's wrist was swollen and red from being twisted. Feeling embarrassed, he scurried away and swore to himself that he would get back at Frazier in the future. Sheila felt relieved as the crowd began dispersing. She didn't know if any of them would bother posting their recordings, but for the time being, she didn't want any more witnesses. For the first time, Frazier had impressed her with how he hadn't been afraid of confrontation and stood up for his loved ones. It reminded her of the day that she and Natalia had been rescued by the masked hero. However, twisting someone's arm wasn't the same as the feats done by the mystery man.
Regardless, maybe he isn't as useless as everyone thinks, she thought.
After dropping Sheila off, Frazier went home. Natalia was waiting for him. She dragged him into their bedroom before he had even had a chance to take off his coat, much to Houstus and Dorothy's surprise. No matter how bad their relationship had been in the past, they had always made up. But this time, Frazier and Natalia seemed to have reached a new abyss.
"Will Natalia finally ask him for a divorce?"
asked Dorothy to herself excitedly. She dug out her cell phone and messaged a man she knew who was in love with her daughter, telling him that the object of his desire may soon be single again. She smiled as he sent her a very favorable response. Natalia locked the bedroom door behind them and glared at Frazier.
"Honey, why are you looking at me like that?"
"Did I do something wrong?" Frazier asked in a small voice. He knew he was still in trouble for not having picked up Natalia's aunt a few days earlier.
"You're asking me?" she asked incredulously. "Do you have any idea what you've done?"
He looked at her, waiting for her to tell him, but she stood quietly, waiting for an answer.
"Honey, I'm sorry I didn't go to the station to pick up your aunt," he said, hoping it would be the end of the matter. "Don't change the subject with me," she replied angrily. "Why did you get involved with Sheila and her boyfriend?"
"Pardon?" he asked. He'd helped Sheila out, but instead of thanking him, she had gone and complained to his wife instead. He smiled, relieved that Natalia had finally moved on from the incident at the station.
"Why are you smiling?" she asked, her anger boiling over. "Why did you fight him? Are you even taking my words seriously?"
"Of course, I take your words seriously," he said, trying to soothe her. He told her about the events that had unfolded on the street, leaving out a few details, such as when he'd asked Billy to apologize to Natalia or that he had punched him twice.
"Are you sure you're telling me the whole truth?" she asked. "Because if you are, what does Sheila mean by sending this to me?"
She picked up her phone and showed him a message Sheila had sent her.
"Natalia, your husband looks so cool when he's fighting. Turns out he's not that useless after all," it said. "He defended you beautifully. Thank him for me."
She put down her cell phone and looked at him.
"You defended me? Tell me honestly what happened," she demanded. "Because when I called Sheila to ask what she was talking about, she wouldn't give me a straight answer either."
Frazier looked at her while he decided what to say. He knew that he couldn't tell her the truth.
"Sheila's your best friend," he said smoothly. "Of course I'm going to defend both you and her. But if you don't like it, I'll avoid her from now on."
Natalia opened her mouth to reply, but no words came out. If she said nothing, it implied that she condoned his fighting. But if she told him to stop, it would look like she was jealous of Sheila, and being jealous of her friend was something she couldn't tolerate.
"Oh, whatever,"
she said awkwardly, trying to dismiss all the thoughts rushing through her head. She left the room, slamming the door behind her loudly. The following day, Frazier went to the local shopping mall early. An underground boxing competition was going to be held there, and he wanted to see how Hugh Styles was involved. He had arranged for Brett and Ryan to come with him. He had also asked Prescott Carter, but for his own safety, Prescott avoided Hugh and decided to stay away. As soon as Ryan arrived, they got into the elevator and went down to a private warehouse owned by a local supermarket. Many people knew that the shopping mall had 2 levels in the basement for parking. What they didn't know was that there was also a secret 3rd level underneath, and this was where the competition was being held. The competition was already well underway by the time they arrived. The atmosphere was heated, with a great deal of money exchanging hands as people bet on the outcomes of each bout. Security guards were manning the door, turning away anyone they didn't recognize. As Frazier arrived, they stepped aside and let him in. On the stage, 2 big, muscular men were fighting. The taller man's elbow landed heavily on his opponent's back with a loud crack. The shorter man fell heavily to the canvas, and the referee stepped in to stop the bout. A voice came over a loudspeaker.
"That's Tarzan's 20th consecutive victory," it said. "Who would like to challenge him?"
The fighter known as Tarzan raised his hands in a victory salute, roaring loudly. The crowd went crazy, lapping up his celebratory dance. No one in the audience volunteered to fight him. Seeing how efficiently he dispatched his opponent, nobody was keen to experience the same outcome. Staying alive was a greater reward than a trophy.
"Is there anyone else?"
asked the man with the loudspeaker. He had entered the ring.
"If you beat Tarzan, his record of 20 straight victories will become yours."
His words weren't enough to persuade anyone.
"Tarzan works for Hugh Styles," said Ryan to Frazier under his breath. "He's strong in both attack and defense, and his fist is like a cannonball. Hitting him is supposed to be just like hitting an armored tank. He sure is a tough one."
Although the crowd was full of people keen to have a go, no one wanted to fight Tarzan.
"I will count from 3, said the competition announcer. "If no one wants to challenge Tarzan, I will announce him as champion." He paused. 3, 2.
But he didn't get to finish his countdown.
"Wait a minute," shouted a voice.
The entire crowd turned to see where the voice had come from. At the doorway was a man with a broken arm. It was Malcolm Becker, and he had come alone.
"Is he a fool?" asked one of the men in the crowd. "He's got his arm in a sling, and Tarzan is undefeated."
"Be quiet," said his friend. "Do you know who he is? He's Malcolm Becker. If you say things like that around here, you'll look like a complete idiot."
Malcolm walked toward the arena, the crowd parting before him in respectful silence. No one dared get in his way. Ryan looked worried. Having just seen Tarzan's last bout, he was convinced that Malcolm was courting death. Frazier watched silently. He knew if Malcolm was there purely to seek revenge on Hugh Styles, he would feel guilty. He had partly been to blame for the whole affair, too. He also knew that an injured Malcolm was no match for the huge man in the arena.
"Malcolm Becker," said the stadium announcer in surprise. "Are you sure?"
He was also employed by Hugh Styles, and he knew that Malcolm was out for revenge. However, he also knew that Hugh's plan that day wasn't to give his enemies that sort of chance.
"What kind of a host are you?" asked Malcolm to the competition announcer. "Brian, please announce me to your audience." "Of course," said Brian, quickly recovering his composure.
He knew that if he didn't do as Malcolm asked, he would floor him with just one punch.
"Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our new challenger, Malcolm Becker."
The crowd began to clap and whistle excitedly. They knew they were about to watch a classic match. On one side was an undefeated Tarzan. On the other was Malcolm Becker, whose reputation hadn't diminished in the slightest of ways.
"Seconds out. Round 1. Said Brian through his loudspeaker.
Hey guys, Frazier here. Listen to the full episode of Unraveling the Son-In-Law exclusively on Pocket FM app. Click the link in description to install the app now.